romance is probably one of the most popular anime genres, and while it's extremely beloved, it's also one of the most repetitive. It's often criticized as being boring, a cash grab, or just waifu bait, and honestly, I completely agree with it. Almost every romance anime follows the same trajectory. Two characters meet in high school, build a friendship, and eventually end up as a couple. Now, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against this kind of anime. Romance is my favorite genre by far, but sometimes I wish these titles would try to do something different. However, what if I told you that's exactly what happened this season, and there's an anime that breaks away from these common tropes, has a cast filled with well-written characters we can relate to, and most importantly, it has the ability to create a psychological impact on us, where we understand what the characters go through and feel it affect our own mental state. Well, that anime is... I introduce you to Makeine, also known as Many Losing Heroines, an anime that was relatively unknown at the start of the season, but quickly became one of the most popular shows of this season. It's the highest rated non-sequel, and also the most anticipated each week. But what did it do to become this popular out of nowhere? Why is it so beloved? Well, it's different. Makeine starts out with a surprisingly deep reflection, as our main character, Nokomizu, contemplates teenage romance, how most couples are destined to break up, yet he wonders what it would be like to experience it himself. Super deep thoughts that quickly get swept away as he suddenly witnesses the worst thing imaginable, a breakup. Even though the two weren't really together. Now, this opening scene is typically found at the end of a romance anime between the losing heroine and the main character, but here it happens right at the start, setting the tone for something unique. The scene is dramatic, sad, and filled with genuine emotions from a character we know nothing about, but most importantly, it shows us just how weird she is. Unfortunately for poor Nokomizu, he can't stop looking away from it, and when she notices him watching, it forces him into the middle of it. She then uses his presence as an excuse to gush about everything that happened. And to make matters worse, she racks up a huge debt with him by eating a ton of food without having any money to pay for it. And that is how our poor Nokomizu gets involved with her, despite his best efforts to stay away. At first glance, Makeine seems like your typical high school romance where two opposites get together. It would make sense if it were just a romance between these two, but we quickly realize that's not the case at all. From the very first episode, we are introduced to all four of our main characters. Nokomizu, a loner who prefers to spend time alone and is unfairly seen as a creepy weirdo by everyone, even though he hasn't really done anything. Yanami, his polar opposite, a popular and playful girl who also loves eating a lot. Lemon, a super cheerful and athletic girl, and Kamari, a socially awkward girl who is terrified of socializing, yet confident when it matters. At the start of the story, these four don't really know each other, but one thing brings them together, the very thing that makes this anime different. They were all rejected by their crushes, and Nokomizu is just kind of forced into observing it. What makes this romance so unique is that it shows the opposite side of love, the perspective of the girl who lost, which is not a common theme in anime. Sure, there are girls who lose in the end, but they are rarely the main focus. The anime takes a surprisingly deep tone, treating this situation seriously, but not like it's the end of the world. The story is essentially about these three girls dealing with being friend-zoned in their own unique ways, which wraps up in about 3 episodes and then shifts into smaller stories. But why is it getting more and more popular each week if the big plot point is already done? Well, because of... The character writing in Makeine is absolutely top-notch, and people genuinely love the characters. At first glance, they seem fairly simple, just typical high school archetypes, but as the show progresses, we realize that there's a surprising amount of depth to them. They often do things that are unexpected, but it never feels out of place. Instead, it feels natural, like real people evolving. The beauty lies in the subtleties of their interactions. Take, for example, a simple scene where they discuss what kind of water fountains are around the school and which one is the best. Now, this shouldn't be interesting, right? It's such a mundane topic, but the way the conversation flows, the little nuances in the reactions, and how it gives us a glimpse into their personalities makes it oddly captivating. You find yourself care about the smallest details, what the characters think, how they react, and what happens to them. They feel like real people with a kind of emotional complexity that sets them apart from typical romance characters who are often one-dimensional. First and foremost, there's Nokomizu, the character we primarily follow. You might expect him to be boring because he's an awkward loner, but that's not the case at all. The show avoids the usual over-the-top depiction of loners in anime. Nokomizu isn't portrayed as an extreme introvert or someone who's socially incompetent. He's just quiet and prefers his own company. What's refreshing about him is that the anime doesn't rely on the usual tropes to make him interesting. Instead, they focus on his thoughtfulness, his willingness to help others, and the subtle ways he tries to overcome his own insecurities. One of the things I love most about Nokomizu is how considerate he is despite his loner status. He genuinely cares for the people around him, even if he's reluctant to get involved at first. For example, there's a scene where he goes out of his way to support Lemon who's feeling down, or stays with Komari when she got sick in the last episode, even though it's outside of his comfort zone. It's moments like this that make him so relatable and easy to root for. He's not overly weird or insecure, but just someone navigating his own insecurities in a realistic way, which makes him stand out among anime protagonists. I also really appreciate how the anime doesn't rush the romance. In most romance anime, my biggest complaint is that it takes too long for the characters to get together. However, in this case, I don't mind it because the focus is more on three girls moving on from their past experiences. It wouldn't make sense for any of them to suddenly become interested in Nokomizu, and I really appreciate that the story respects that. Talking about the girls, the one we first get to know is Yanami, a really talkative, popular girl that loves eating. Wait a minute! Her first name is Anna, she's popular, and she loves eating? It's almost like I've seen a character like that before. She's clearly the fan favorite. I mean, most of you guys voted for her. And it's not even that the others are bad. It's simply that she stands out so much. You could say she fits the popular girl archetype. Bubbly, cheerful, and a bit dense at times. However, like the others, there's more to her than meets the eye. She has this infectious energy that lights up any scene she's in. But at the same time, she's incredibly vulnerable. You can see it in the way she tries to mask her insecurities with her constant need for attention. Yanami gets jealous easily, and it's obvious that she sometimes feels like she's competing for affection, even if it's just for staying relevant in her friends' lives. That said, her emotional complexity doesn't paint her as selfish or petty. Quite the opposite. Her jealousy stems from a genuine desire to be valued by the people she cares about. One thing I love about her is how, despite her own integral struggles, she's always there for the other girls, especially during their relationship crisis. The second girl we meet is Lemon. She's probably even a bit more extroverted than Yanami, but unlike her, Lemon feels much brighter and more approachable. I'm not even sure why, but she's my favorite character. And guys, I'm extremely disappointed that only 10% of you voted for her. I get that Yanami is more popular, but how is Lemon in last place? Give some love to tomboys. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. And finally, the third girl is Komari. At first she seems like an introverted loner like Nokomizu, but we quickly realize it's much worse. She has bocce level anxiety. In a way, it's hilarious with all the silly noises she makes, but it's also really sad. I genuinely feel bad for her because, unlike Nokomizu, she doesn't want to be a loner. She wants to be around people, and it's heartbreaking to see how, as her friends prepare to leave, she doesn't know what to do but still tries her best. I really appreciate that the writer didn't turn her anxiety into a comedic effect. It's common to see that in anime, and while there is nothing inherently wrong with it, I love that we get to see a character who slowly grows and becomes more confident around others. Even if she doesn't fully overcome her anxiety, it's a realistic depiction, and I really like that. However, one thing about Makeine is that, like many other romance anime, it's also a comedy. But unlike others, it's actually really well executed. It's actually... Comedy in anime is a really subjective matter. You might find something like Nichijou hilarious, but I personally find it quite boring. It all comes down to personal taste. However, I think Makeine strikes a great balance with its humor. It's not over the top, it doesn't take you out of the story, and it seamlessly fits within the narrative. The jokes aren't forced, they come naturally from the characters' interactions and personalities. Makeine is funny because it blends its serious theme with quirky, lighthearted moments that catch you off guard. It does small, character-driven moments that generate humor, rather than relying on exaggerated anime tropes. The show also plays with the timing really well. Just when you think the tone is about to get too heavy, a well-placed comedic beat breaks the tension without trivializing the emotions. This balance of humor and heart keeps the tone fresh and entertaining, allowing the audience to connect with the characters on a deeper level while still enjoying the lighter moments. Even during the more dramatic arcs, the humor never feels out of place. It's not just about making us laugh, it reflects the characters' humanity, quirks, and imperfections. However, despite it being really funny, it also gets... As I said at the start, despite this anime being quite comedic, it also has a lot of serious parts. The main focus of the anime is the girls getting through the fact that they got rejected. It's not something easy to get through, and I really like how the anime depicts that, because something like that is not just about heartbreak, but about coping, moving on, and dealing with the emotional scars. It's simply sad to see characters who, despite their best efforts, face rejection and must find their way forward. That emotional depth, paired with the realism of how they process these feelings, creates a story that is bittersweet, making us empathize with them while feeling the weight of their struggles. Each of the girls is dealing with being friendzoned in their own unique way. Yanami, for example, uses her playful and outgoing personality as a mask for her pain, but underneath she's still vulnerable. Lemon is someone that initially bounces back quickly, but you can tell that there's more going on beneath the surface. Komari is the socially awkward one, which makes especially surprising to be the most open about it. Seeing her gradually open up and build her confidence is one of the most rewarding character arcs. The show gives each of them time and space they need to process their feelings, rather than rushing them into a new romantic dynamic. What really elevates Makeine is how it doesn't treat rejection as a simple plot point. In most anime, rejection is either brushed off or used as an emotional catalyst for other characters to succeed in love. But here it's treated with care. We see how each of the girls struggles to come to terms with their feelings, and it's incredibly refreshing to see this side of romance explored in such depth. It's not just about getting together, it's about learning how to move on, how to grow from the experience, and how to find strength in the friendships they build along the way. And because of this focus on character growth, you don't mind that the romance isn't the immediate payoff. In fact, it makes the slow burn even more engaging. It allows the characters to grow individually, and when they finally move forward romantically, it feels earned and organic. The anime makes you realize that romance isn't always about the end goal, it's about the journey, and Makeine captures that beautifully. Now, what ties all of this together is animation, directing, and voice acting are things I always mention in my reviews, especially when talking about an anime I like. But Makeine truly stands out in these aspects. Every episode feels like movie quality. The general art style is stunning, the animation is consistently top-notch, and there are so many unnecessarily beautiful shots. A1 Pictures clearly put their best team on this project. It feels like a true passion project, and that especially shows with how they do certain things that you rarely see other anime do, like having their own website just to show off, which by the way is so cool. I never expected to see something like a calorie counter in an anime, but it also features a relationship chart that updates each episode, a map showcasing all the real life locations that inspired the anime, a list of the best water fountains in Toyohashi, and new content added every week. Visually it's the best looking anime of the year without a doubt. When you think about it, Makeine is such a unique and well-made anime. It's not something that should work on paper, but it strikes a perfect balance of character interactions, comedy, and drama that you don't often see in other series. I never expected Makeine to become my favorite anime this season. Even though I ranked it S tier in my seasonal video, it still exceeded my expectations. While there aren't many anime with a similar theme, if you're looking for a show with similar character dynamics, click on this video. Goodbye, and see you with most likely the next seasonal ranking video, unless I cook up something else in the meantime.